Alright everyone, how's the quality? Alright, so I'm just making sure the audio is working properly, and I think it is. So let's get started. So you remember in the last video I uploaded, we had that scene with the sci-fi drones flying by, and I'm actually going to play that quickly. So let me just get it on my web browser here. Let's just find the video. I got it on the second monitor and I'll bring it over. A little bit difficult to do this with my display here, but you're going to see a lot of tabs. Hold on. Sorry about that. Okay. I think I got it pretty, almost taking up the screen. Not perfect, but it's good enough. So yeah, this is what I got. Let's turn the audio on and I'll play this. Okay. Alright, so that video played, and let me just drag this to the other part of my screen here, and yeah, so we got our 3D scene here, and what we got, let me just bring this over, and we don't need the node editor for now, but I'm going to show you how I basically made this, how I did the audio effects, and I'm just going to give a basic overview, but I'm going to make it detailed enough so you guys can understand, and maybe you guys can recreate something like this, because this was a pretty major project, but it was definitely a lot of fun, and I hope I can inspire others to kind of work with Blender and maybe create their own animation. So there we go. And so what I basically got here is I got the drone models here, and this is just a particle system. So as you can see, if I click on particles, you can see we got our particles emitting the drones, and I have it instancing lens object here, and that object would be, I believe it's this one. Yeah, so this object here, this lens object, is being instanced. Maybe it's being instanced, let's see, 78 times. So we got 78 drones flying through the air. And then I also added a force field, which just adds wind and kind of just adds some more turbulence to the motion, so that the drone objects kind of move through the scene and go, rather than just going straight, there's kind of like some not exactly turbulence, but more force moving them across. And you could see that if we play this, well, for some reason it's not, it's actually not responding too well. Is it cached? Maybe it's not cached. Or maybe I have to bake the particles. Yeah, I believe that's the problem. Or no, they're already baked. Yeah, it seems like it's playing back really slow. I'm not sure if this is just maybe a bug, but I know in Blender 2.83 it was the playback speed might have been much better, but I'll have to investigate that and see what's going on. But basically, these particles are traveling through the air. And you know what? I can actually disable the ground, and maybe that will speed things up. And I'll explain what all these objects are. But let's see if that improves playback. And maybe what else I could do is put on simplify and just change the max subdivisions down to 1. It's not really working well. Okay, well, I'm not sure what's going on with that. Could be because I'm streaming. That could be definitely why it's not playing back fast. But yeah, we generally could see that we got these objects flying past the camera, and it's done with the particle system. And what I also did is I modeled these bridge-like structures, and I'm going to turn the subdivision back up to 3 so we get some of that quality back. And if we go to the array modifier, well, first let's go to the object. So I'll press on tab on my keyboard, and you can see we just got it at the origin here. And what it is it's very simple geometry. It's nothing complicated. It's just basically a cube. What I did is I just added a cube, and then I simply flattened it on the z-axis, and then stretched it across the x-axis, and then inset the faces, and then extruded a little bit on the top, and then scale that down. So I kind of did something like this. So I'm going to add mesh cube, move it on the x, and let's just grab that to the side. So I did something like, let's scale this cube up, but scale it down on the z-axis, scale it down on the y-axis, a little more in the z, and then what I did is I took the top face, inset by pressing I, and then move that up, and then I kind of get like a tile. And then what I did is I added the array modifier, but I did it on the y-axis, -1, and I believe I did 4, and then you can add another array modifier, and you can add as many as you want. And I just did that for the bridge, and I also used, what did I use? I used a subdivide, and then I used a curve so that I could have this object follow a curve and kind of bend as it's going along the curve. And that kind of creates like a bridge-like structure. I thought it looked really cool. And you can always up the subdivision level, and in the viewport I have it limited to 2 just for performance. But for the render I definitely want to put that up so we don't get these like harsh bends in the geometry. So you can see if I turn it like up to 3 it looks smoother, and 4 is even better. But I don't think I need 4, I think 3 is good. And maybe this curve resolution could have been a bit higher, like 96. And then you could change this back up to something like 3 or 4. Yeah, it still looks a little bent there. I'm not sure why. But yeah, that's generally what I did. But I'm just going to put that curve object back down to 48. Should be enough. Yeah. Oops. 48. And then I'm just going to turn that back down to 2. Just for performance. So yeah, that covers that. And now you may be wondering about this bridge object, what I did. And for this, what I did is I have... let's actually go to Eevee now. Because I rendered this in Eevee. And I'm going to go to Eevee and select... Make sure my GPU is on, and then just show you a basic render. And it's going to take a little while to compile the shaders. Yeah, so it's compiling the shaders. I hope this is the performance as well on your end. Please leave a comment if the performance looks really bad. It's fine here, but sometimes the stream may be lagging bad, so I'm not really sure. I'm viewing it, but I think it looks fine. So anyway, what we got here is I got this concrete material, and you notice there's another cube overlapping it, and there's actually a reason for that. So that's actually to act as a collision object for these drones, so that when they fly by, they don't just go straight through it. That's supposed to make them hit this object, and you could see I added that as let's see, physics. Yeah, I added that as a collision object, and you could see if we go down to that object here, it's hidden for the render, so this collision object will not show up in the final render. So I'm just going to hide that in the viewport to make it less confusing. That's just to make sure that these drones don't go through the mesh. Basically, they collide. And now for this, these bridge holders, and I'm going to actually unhide the ground so it's less confusing, and then I'm going to just hide that again. For this bridge object, we got a concrete material, and what's amazing about this, if you notice, if I zoom in all the way, if I zoom in really far, you notice the resolution does not go down. And the reason for this is, watch this. So I'm going to bring up this. I'm going to go to the shader editor, and I'm going to check, make sure this one's selected. And there it is. It's all procedural. So there's no image textures used to create this. It's all node based, and this texture is all generated from nodes. There were no images in it. It's all procedural, and the advantage of this is you don't have to find images to make a texture with. You can just create a procedural material, and its resolution is effectively infinity. Yeah. So you can zoom in as far as you need to, and it never will get blurry. And it's very customizable. You can change the colors of it. You can do all sorts of stuff. You can change the roughness. Not that you'd want to on concrete, but you can. And you can also make it like metallic. I don't know why you'd want metallic concrete, but I made the shader so you can really change it, and now it actually looks like kind of like old metal now, like cast iron or something. So yeah, that's definitely interesting. So yeah, if you change any shader's properties, you generally get different results. And yeah, so that's basically the node setup for the concrete material. Just uses a bunch of noise textures basically, and I mix them. Then I add some Musgrave into it, find the difference, and then I add that to the base color, and then I add some bump mapping to the normal, all procedural. Some Voronoi mixed in. Yeah. And I'm not going to go into the shader setup, this shader setup per se, in detail because it takes a lot of time to explain. And I want to get to the rest of the breakdown here of the scene. But you could see that it definitely gives a very realistic result. So yeah, that's how I made that concrete material. And for this fence, it's also fully procedural. If I zoom in, again, you can zoom in as far as you need to, never gets blurry. It's all procedural, and it's a procedural wood texture I made from scratch. And it's a little less complicated than the concrete material, but there's still a lot involved. You can see I just generally took some noise textures, then kind of did a color ramp to find different colors within that texture and mapped it out. Then mapped it to different colors. Then did that, and I added that for the bump right here and the base color. And then I got this. And I didn't use the setup on the bottom here, so I can always delete that later, but I left it in case I use it. Now, okay, this performance is not doing good, so I'm going to disable Eevee temporarily. And let's go to one of our drones here, and I got many materials on this drone. Actually, it would be this drone, and you can see that each piece has a different texture. So let's zoom into it. Yeah, and you can see that we got the red texture here, and that's this piece, which would be, I believe, this one, scratched red metal. Again, it's all procedural materials. Even the scratches themselves are actually procedural. And that just adds some subtle imperfections that just really helps things look realistic. And there's also dust I added in. See, I'm not sure how well it shows up, but if you look closely, there is some dust and imperfections which really help sell the realism. Yeah. And I also have this model up for sale, and I'm going to put the links in the description when I upload this video. So, yeah. Okay, so that covers the material creation. Now let's get to the shadows and lighting, and how I did the lighting of the scene, how I made things match the footage, basically. So I'm going to go to my camera view, and let's hope the background video did load. I think it did. Let's see, it might have not loaded. Camera view. Yeah, I just had to turn it on right there. So I'm just going to scroll back, and obviously the performance is not too good, especially in EV, but that's okay. And I have a GTX 2060 I recently upgraded to, and still, EV still takes a minute, it doesn't render real time exactly, especially with complex procedural materials. In fact, sometimes I found cycles to be quicker in some cases, not always though. A lot of the time EV is a lot faster, so I still tend to use EV a lot, but I do like to go with cycles sometimes for the realism. But for this I did use EV. And for the ground, I had grass, so I could just enable that. And you see that there's a bunch of grass. But now my viewport performance is just really, really, really slow. So I'm going to disable that just temporarily. So yeah, the camera generally walks the scene, and what I did is I actually, in my real footage, I'm going to actually hide everything so you can see what the original footage looked like. So I'm going to press A, H. Oh wait. No, I didn't want to do that. I don't want to hide the camera. So I'm going to just deselect the camera. And now go back to, whoops, I didn't want to do that. Yeah, camera's deselected, go back to camera, and then I'm just going to hide everything. And yeah, look at the difference. So I'm going to undo that. That's the raw footage. So you can see without this, there's actually a swimming pool there. So basically I reconstructed the whole scene. I changed everything around and I just left this part pretty much. Yeah. And then obviously I did add in the grass. And what this grass is, wow, this is really slow. That's okay though. It's just one thing I modeled. Wow. Okay, I think I gotta turn this off. The performance is really bad. For rendering it's fine, but for viewport it's definitely not. It's not fast enough. So what I did is I basically have a grass I modeled here, and I believe I also have this for sale too. So I have textures I added. I created these procedurally and then baked them out to UV maps. And you can see if we zoom in closely, the leaf's got a subtle texture on it that just adds some more realism. And I instanced that 10,000 times across the ground to create basic grass. It's more like crabgrass, but it works. Okay. So I just want to cover a few more materials. So this window here, I also did this from procedurally. Everything's procedural actually, except the grass, which is technically procedural, but I did bake it out to an image for performance. But everything else is purely procedural, including this window, which is just some stretch noise textures in the Z direction to get this kind of watery look, or like almost like the glass is worn down a little bit. And what else I got here is I got, my mouse is like slipping. Something's wrong with the button and it's not clicking all the time, so I apologize about that. It's like, here. Yeah, so I got the cat here, and this is actually my cat. So what I did is I just took a bunch of images, or not an image, sorry, a video, broke it down into a lot of images, and then I took a mask that I had to do. I basically took a luminosity mask of the cat in Blender, and I used that to trace around based on the brightness of the scene, so it could distinguish between dark and bright. She was next to a black background, so I could basically hide everything that was black, so just the cat would show. And it did okay. I would have rather used a proper green screen setup. But you notice if I zoom in, there's definitely imperfections. Like her eyes are see-through for one thing because her eyes are dark. So remember, black in it was like keying out black dark colors. So anything dark shows up as transparent. So that doesn't always work, ideally. So ideally I'll get a green screen set up and I could do this properly and get a much better mask. And you see she's really floating actually. So in my next video I hope to make like a 3D model that kind of imitates the cat, but I hide it and I just use it for shadows to get more realistic shadows. But yeah, that's how I did that. And the thing is, from far away it doesn't look bad, so I figured I didn't need a perfect mask, especially if the camera's far away. You wouldn't really notice. Let's see, so okay, this I modeled from scratch. I used booleans, a lot of booleans, just to model this. It's all hard surface modeling. There's a lot of courses about it. I didn't use any add-ons. I just basically, like, let's just give an example. So I'm going to go back here, add a cube, scale it up, and then I'll add another cube, duplicate, scale it down, move it on the z-axis, then shift select the second one, then control minus. But I want to make sure that Bool Tool add-on is enabled. So I just use factory add-ons. I didn't use any add-ons that are not included with Blender. So I just selected the first cube and then the second one, then control minus, and there you go. You already got something interesting, and you could just edit where you place this, and yeah, that's how I created these hard surface objects here. This bathroom I modeled with subdivision modeling. It was a long process, and this model I also sell in my store. I'll put a link in the description to my store. But this one took some time to do. I did this one a while back. I figured I put it in the scene. It looked pretty good. It was actually supposed to be a bathroom, but it fit in pretty well, and I kind of made it look more like a regular hotel room just for the scene, and it kind of worked well. You notice the doors not modeled. You notice the glass here is overhanging on the side, but that didn't matter because the camera never really saw that part, so I didn't worry about fixing it for this video. Yeah. So, the big part of this video is actually going to be the compositing. That's actually, believe it or not, what took one of the longest times to do. And what I got here is I got Eevee, and I also have a cycles view layer that I created. And if I just Alt-H everything to unhide it, I got two render layers with the same exact objects. And let's just go to frame, I don't know, let's say 450. And 450. Now I'll leave that, and I'll go to Eevee. 450. And you could see that it's the same exact time in both in both scenes. And cycles was, I only did cycles at one sample just to get the motion vectors so I can composite them in. And I'm going to show you what I mean by this because it's very interesting and it's a very good way of getting real motion blur into Eevee. So I'm going to just set this to GPU compute and I'm going to render this out. 256 tile size, and then I'm going to go to Eevee, and these settings I believe are good. And since I'm doing all the compositing, I don't want to enable bloom or ambient occlusion. Since I add bloom in post, I add it in the compositing setup. So I am going to render now, and this is going to take a little while, about a minute or two. And yet, it does take a long time sometimes, because even though Eevee can be real time, with procedural textures, sometimes it takes a bit longer. So now it just did Eevee, but now it's going to do cycles. Okay, cycles just rendered. And it's just a grayscale pass. There is absolutely no textures in the cycles view. And cycles just takes a split second to render. So it hardly adds any time. That's just to get the motion blur data. And there we go. So we got our composite here, and I'm going to go to the compositing setup. And this node tree is probably going to scare you because it's so complicated, but I'm going to give a basic overview of it and try to help you guys understand the basics of how it works. Okay, so compositor, and you can see what we got here is the massive compositor node tree. And this is over 50 nodes. There's a lot of setup in here that I did to get everything to look perfect. Honestly, I probably should have made this a little better organized, but I think I remember what everything did pretty well. So basically I got my original clip here, okay, and you could see that it looks very bland basically. So then what I figured I'd do is add some color correction, RGB curves actually. Yeah, and that just brings out the contrast to better match my CGI. And what I have here is a denoise node, which I disabled because it slows down the compositing, and I don't use it for previews, just for final renders. So if I go to here, you see we got our original image. And after all of this compositing, sorry about that. After all this compositing, what comes out is this. And you're just going to have to wait about 30 seconds for it to composite here. Big difference. Much more professional looking. There's more colors are better. There's glare, and there's these subtle lens flares. Everything. Compositing is very important. To make a scene look great, compositing is actually crucial. Without compositing, you generally just get very boring results. So it's very important to do compositing correctly. And so first I just speckled the footage to, well, what I did is I took a color ramp of the footage, sorry, not the footage, the CGI, and then I just speckled it to make it look smoother and get rid of some noise. And then I added that to here, which is a multiply node. And what this does is I'm just basically taking the most brightest parts of my image here, which is this. So I'm just taking the very brightest parts. And now you can see I added a color ramp to extract the brightest parts of the image here. Problem is, we don't have colors. So then I just multiply that back by the original image's colors to get back the to get back the colors of the original lights. And then I take those lights and I add some blur to it, some more glare, which I then only apply three iterations in 2 streaks, and then I take some Gaussian blur that further, and then I add that back to the original image. And there we go, we got that. And after that, I take some fog glow, and you can see that that just helps things look really good, and it just enhances the overall look. So before that, we have that, and then if I add fog glow, it kind of like makes the light from the scene look like it's going over the objects, and it makes things just fit in better, makes it more CGI looking, and yeah. So this bottom setup here basically does, I believe, the same thing. Yeah, but except it makes the streaks longer, more horizontal, so it makes the streaks look longer, and then I just added a little bit of that in, just to add some kind of dynamic, like almost like different qualities to the lens flare. So you can almost see, if we zoom in here, there's almost 2 streaks like overlaid. It's very subtle, but it just enhances the realism and just makes things look cooler. Okay, Blender is actually freezing. Okay, it's loading again. Alright. Yeah, so after that, I took a color balance node, and we can view that just to adjust the colors. The And I'm just waiting for this compositor to finish here because as I go through the nodes, it gets slower and slower. Just gonna wait for that to fully composite. Okay, and it looks like it did. And you can see we got our input here and we got our footage. We got the footage right here. And let me just make sure that everything's okay for the video. And it looks like everything's showing up properly. Just wanted to double check on that. So yeah. So I got the color adjustment here. And then I alpha that over back to the original footage clip that I took with the camera. And this just matches the CGI and makes it match the footage. So after that, we get this. And you'll see the footage, the VFX plate show up back there. And if I zoom out, something happened. Oh, wow, it looks like it was actually playing my video this whole time, and that's why the performance just went really bad. Not sure where that happened, so I'm just going to go back on the timeline here. 444 was the frame. Yeah. Nope, not that frame. It was actually 450. Yeah. There it is. I think. Yeah. So what we got here now is the background showing up, and I just color balance the CGI again to make it match up with the footage. And that's shown on this view right here. But then I decided I need to add lens distortion, so I added lens distortion to everything. And I used, I used an ellipse mask to add more distortion to the edges. After that, I got this. So let's let that load on and see what we got. So we can see the edges just got a slight dispersion effect where the colors change there a little bit, and it kind of looks like a camera lens effect. And I did not want to overdo this effect. Of course, you can go really crazy with it and add something like 0.5, but then you get something really crazy that you probably don't want. So we'll let that load again. And of course, it's using the ellipse mask as a factor of where to mix this effect in. So it's only affecting the median edges. This is the ellipse mask. So wherever it's white is where this effect is applied. Anywhere where it's black, this effect does not apply. So it's a kind of a clever way to control it. But I'm just going to put that back down to 0.2. Okay. And then I multiplied that by believe this is a subtle let's mask that I multiplied it by. So that it mixes with the footage a little bit more, and this is not just applied as a layer. Yeah, that's what it was for, and I also added it to the image, like this. Actually, I think this node should not be here. I might have to delete that, but anyway, what I did is I took the very brightest parts of the image again, right here, and I added blur to it, and a color ramp. And I use that as a factor for where to add this lens effect that I created from scratch too. And yeah, so the very brightest images, objects, if you look very closely, you could see that there's these circular lens distortion elements. Like there's one right here. I don't know how visible it is on your end with this, with the YouTube display, but there's one right there. It's very subtle. So it's basically just overlaying this image I created out of noise. And then I'm taking that and then inverting it so that these white objects are displayed. Then I blur it by 4 with fast Gaussian and add lens distortion to it. So you see we got that. And then what we do is I'm adding more lens distortion right here to the edges. And then finally, what I do is I say, okay, where's the brightest parts of the image? And, or no, I have this here. This basically says, okay, so we got the brightest parts of our image masked out, and now we can use that as a factor for where to apply this effect. And after that, we get this. Yeah. And I can always increase the strength for that, but I'm going to leave it how it is. And then finally, what I did is I added in some fog glow. So I got this, which is just the Z-Pass, and I use that and I map it to a color ramp from black to white as you go from foreground to background. And then I just added that to the original image, but not much, just 0.05. So we'll see what we get when we view this node here. And yeah, it does take a little while for this to load because again, this node tree is humongous. So yeah, now you see there's a little bit of fog, and obviously I could raise that to something like 0.5 if you really wanted to have a lot of fog. And that could look cool, but I didn't really want that. I just wanted a little bit of fog. And yeah, that actually looks really cool. And then after that, what I did is I did a final color adjustment, and yeah, I did a final color adjustment. I added some, again, film grain that I created with various noise textures, added that in, and then finally I added it together to make it, since I multiplied it, it darkened the footage, so I added the footage back onto itself. And then after all that, I got this. Yeah, and one thing I noticed I have to change is the fog glow. I have to turn that back down to 0.05 because I did raise that before. Yeah. So that's how I got that, and for the vector blur, I just wanted to cover that briefly. What I did is I just took the cycles pass here separately, which is this pass, and I took the vector pass, and I just added that into the speed vector here of the vector blur, and then I took the Z depth, added that in too. And then finally I took our original image, then put it here onto the vector blur pass, and then I added every single thing back onto it from the film. And then I got our motion blur in. So yeah, that's basically how I went from this. I went from these two separate passes. I went from this all the way to here. And this is going to take about 20 seconds again to load up. And yeah, you can see how much different it looks. You can see it looks much more professional. So basically, compositing is everything. It is extremely important when you become a filmmaker to get lots of experience with compositing. I know that node setups look very scary at first, and this is definitely one of the biggest node trees I've ever built in Blender. And it requires a lot of experience to get started, but once you get started, keep in mind I was a beginner at one point. Like everybody starts out as a beginner. When I first started Blender, I had no idea what I was doing. I could only connect one node, maybe not. I had actually no experience with the node editor. I kind of just got scared of it. Every time I saw nodes, I just kind of ran away, and I didn't want to look at it ever again. It was just so complicated. I just thought I could never learn it. But then, I decided to try a simple project with nodes once. I'm not exactly sure what project that was, but I just decided I'm gonna work with Blender's nodes, and I think I could create something more interesting if I learned how to use the node system. Like I could create more realistic materials, better compositing setups, and I definitely could not create anything without nodes today. Everything I create uses nodes extensively. They are extremely crucial to use in workflows. Like for example, I don't know how that I could create any kind of material without using the node editor. I could always just go here, but this is how I used to do it when I was like 6 years ago or 5 years ago when I first started in Blender. I remember I just added textures here, but now there is no way to do that. You have to go to the nodes and basically learn how they work, and yeah, always just start out simple, and then as you gain experience, and trust me, with using the node editor, you'll always get more experienced as you practice, and eventually practice will make perfect. You can create more complex and detailed node networks like this. Yeah. And with more detailed node networks, you can create some really cool procedural textures, more detailed compositing setups that can create more special effects, maybe even animated materials that are procedural, which I will be working on. Like I know I created a fire shader once, which was really cool, all procedurally generated. I'm even wondering if there's a way to create a procedural explosion in Blender. This way I wouldn't have to simulate explosions with MantaFlow and have to wait for them to bake out. Instead, I could just create a procedural shader setup that basically does this all with shader setups and nodes, but I've never tried it yet. I know it's a big project to do. I'll have updates if I ever try this out, and I'll definitely put a video up of the process. But yeah, so let's cover the sound design process, because we covered the video, we covered the compositing, we covered the materials shader setup. Let's do the sound design, because that was another major process I worked on here. So I'm just going to open up the file. Let's see. LMMS is what I used to create the music. And let me just save my previous project I worked on. And I think this was the song. Yeah. So let's just make that fit the screen better here. I'm working on a widescreen monitor here, so it's kind of difficult to scale things up properly. That should be good, I think, and let's just bring that to the top. And bring that, yeah. There we go. Okay, so I got the song here, and what I did is I just synthesized all the sounds from scratch. So I'm actually going to play this here. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up the song. So what I did here is I used all synthesizers. So I used Helm, very handy synthesizer here, and I'm gonna actually open it up, and you could see. Let's see, I'm not hearing the sound on my end for some reason. Oh, okay, my mic's enabled. I apologize about that. My mic wasn't even enabled before. So, anyway, as I was saying, that basically wraps up the song. So, all of this is synthesizers. I used Helm. It's a very handy synthesizer to make these sounds. And what I did, I can't get the sound working for some reason. I'm gonna actually X that out. So I got Helm, and you could see that I just played around with some of these settings. I changed filters, I added some LFOs, and you can hear if I click on. Yeah, so you could hear what it sounds like here. And I had a couple others, like this one. And some reverb, delay, distortion, and this allows you to basically allow an effect to cycle on and off. Yeah. And for the main sound, I used Helm again. So I used only Helm as a synthesizer for this song. And you can also use chords, which I added in the piano editor here. So I got this. Yeah. And that's how I synthesized the song. I also added some phaser effects with automation and that just adds some extra extra realism to the song, and I also added in the equalizer, which I also added automation to make it kind of like sound like it's going in and out, sort of. Here it's kind of like wow. It's hard to explain, but as it goes down, the sound kind of changes its tone. Yeah. And that just sounds extra sci-fi, I thought, so that sounded pretty cool. And I also got another song I'm working on. This is for my next video, and this is actually a preview. Not finished yet, but this is going to be basically full CGI. There's not going to be camera tracking for this one. And I'm not going to exactly release what it's about yet. I'm not going to give too much details about it because it's going to be another animation. It will be sci-fi, I will say that. And I should have it up within probably a couple weeks. I'm working on it, and it's going to be a city. There's going to be a city in it, a sci-fi city. So that's what I'll give you for details so far about that project. This is the song. Okay, so that basically covers that's just a preview of the next song I'm working on for my animation, and I don't have to save that because it's already been saved. So now I'm just going to briefly cover how I did this other sound effects, because you remember there was I don't have to save the changes here. So remember there was other sound effects where we had spaceships flying by, and what I did is I just took another synth in here and I used the Zinad sub effects. I made a spaceship sound, and you can see I'm going to actually try to find that file. Let's let that load. Doesn't seem to be loading it. Maybe I opened the wrong one. My computer. I think this might be it, yeah. No. File open, let's try it again. One more time, I'll see if I can find it. If I can't, I can't. Users. Actually, that might have been it. Yes, this is the sound. So, you just hear a spaceship sound, and I just added that in. I added that in with Zinad Sum Effects. I completely synthesized it. And I'm not going to cover what all these settings do. It's just FM synthesis. It's kind of complex, and it would take a much longer tutorial than I can cover here. But I'm going to explain how I added that in at least. So I just edited the instrument, I had the voice parameters, and I had all sorts of modulation that I added. This is generally very complex, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about the synthesizer here. But yeah, so I took this and then I just saved it out as a sound, and then I took that into Blender. I added some speaker objects. I animated speaker objects and used random. Let's see if I can find it here. So I gotta find the graph editor, I believe, but it might have been yeah. So I animated the speaker object's position randomly, and I used some modifiers on the graph. I'm not sure why the graph won't show up. Could it be because I'm not... let's see what's going on. Might have to look into this later. I probably don't even have the right setting here that I'm viewing. But I can at least show you in the dope sheet. I just got some object modifiers in the graph editor. It should be showing up, but it's not. So let's see, would it be sidebar? No, it's not showing up. Basically, it normally shows like a graph here, like a wavy graph representing where the object moves in 3D space, and I added some noise to that so that it's F-curve. Is there the F-curve editor? No. So basically the F-curves kind of vary over time, making the object motion a little more chaotic. So this is the animation. And I'm just gonna... yeah. And you can see the speaker objects each have the sound file attached of the spaceship sound. So I'll add in that sound now so you guys can hear it. As it gets to the camera, it zooms by. Perfect example of the Doppler effect. Then I just took that sound and baked it out to, I baked it as a sound, And then finally, in Ardor, which is another open source program, and I will try to open that up. Ardor is another open source music program that lets you do all sorts of stuff with sound. Just trying to find the file here for Ardor. Let's see. Okay. So I'm just looking for the file. I'm not sure which folder I have it in. I think it might be on my desktop. Let me look in here. And again, I apologize about this. Probably should put this in another video, but I'm going to try to still find it here. So just going to take me about a couple minutes to find this. Actually, what if I just do Ardor? Nope. Oh, okay. I'm finding some of the files. I typed it in on my the other part of my screen here. Yes, I found it. Okay. Awesome. So I'm going to open up my previous session. And that's what we got. I apologize for the delay before. Just could not find that file, but I finally found it. So let's get this positioned better on the screen. And that looks better. So this is just the master recording here. So what I did is I added the spaceship sounds, and then I added the music in, and then I just kind of adjusted volume levels so that everything kind of fits into place. And I also believe I had the spaceships fade at the end. So you get this. Not sure. Why I can't hear it. I think it might be my speaker settings might not be correct on here, especially because I'm streaming, so it's been affecting some applications. It's like it can't use, since I'm using the speakers for OBS, I can't hear this. so I can't get sound out of this. Order tends to be funny like that sometimes, so there's nothing I can do about that, but I can still show you, like, you can see the sound waves here, and we got everything lined up, and I had to sync everything correctly so that the spaceships go by when you hear them, and get the timing correct, so I all adjusted that in here. And there's a lot of stuff you can do in Ardour. I'm not even getting to the basics of what you can do. It's a lot more advanced than Audacity, so I definitely have to get some experience with Ardour. But yeah, that basically covers this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown video of the recent video I posted. Again, I encourage anyone to try to use Blender to make. It's excellent for VFX films. Blender is definitely taking over the industry, and someday I see it replacing proprietary programs. It really is. When you know how to use Blender correctly, it really is very, very powerful software. It really is. Eventually, I hope to get into animation nodes, and eventually everything nodes and particle nodes is going to be added in, and I can't wait for that. I can't wait to create procedural animations, and maybe even procedural cityscapes. If you can generate objects in Blender procedurally, that would be really cool. It could definitely save a lot of time for generative modeling. Can save lots of time, so hopefully I'll have a video of that in the future. But for now, I am going to end the video. I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. Please comment if you have any questions, any suggestions. And yeah, as I've said before, the models are available on the stores, and I'll post the links in where I'm selling them. But yeah, I also release premium Udemy courses, which I'll also link below. And yeah, so I hope to post some more content in the future. Yeah, thank you guys for watching. See you next time.